wanted to get full effect here. It was a little slow. It followed me instead of me bursting into the smoke like I had imagined. I wanted like a silhouette and rock music. And this is all we could do for you this morning. Thank you, Anthony. I am Stacey Hallal. I'm so excited to be here. I'm 48 years old, half Middle Eastern. Thank you. Half Middle Eastern woman, grew up on the East Coast, but have spent most of my adult life splitting my time between Oregon and Illinois, specifically Eugene and Portland and Chicago. I founded this theater 12 years ago in 2008. Many of you probably just heard that it existed. How many, actually, by a round of applause, how many people have been here before for an event or a show? Well, that's great. That's a good number. Then my only other question is, what the fuck is wrong with the rest of you? So, pardon my language. But we have grown very slowly and organically, and I'll go a little bit into that. But I'm just thrilled and honored to have the privilege to tell you a little bit about my story and this story of this space here this morning. I wanted to start 22 years ago when I was 27 years old, and I was living in my sister's attic with my yellow lab, going through a divorce and filing for bankruptcy. That was supposed to contrast my huge entrance. And the way I ended up there was that the previous 5 years, I had lived in Eugene, and I had worked in an art store. I had been a video editor. I made silk dream pillows and sold them at Saturday Market, and became a real estate agent. And that might sound really scattered. But it made complete sense to me that all of those activities were unified by my drive and my stubborn desire to be an artist for a living and to do what I loved. So working at an art store, I learned that art retail doesn't pay that well. Doing video editing, I learned that if you do your passion in a commercial context, it can often burn you out for doing it for your own endeavors when you get home at night. From making silk dream pillows and selling them at Saturday Market, I learned that no one wants to spend more than $20 on one item at Saturday Market, so it better not be something that takes you many, many hours to make. And then for the real estate venture, I had gotten the idea, well, I will make a lot of money really fast as a real estate agent, and then I'll be able to fund my own creative projects on the side. So this was my attempt to separate my passion from money and become my own patron in that way. I learned from that a lot of things, but mainly that real estate agents don't take home as much of that commission as we may think. It's very expensive to be in, and if you do want to make a lot of money in real estate, you work 24/7 at it, which doesn't leave any time for your artistic endeavors. My ex-husband and I had opened a bookstore that was his bookstore, but we had accrued a lot of debt, and he was continuing on with the bookstore when we were getting divorced, and I decided I had finished my time in Eugene. So the struggle between art and commerce, not new. It was just new to me. And it really started when when I told my dad I wanted to go to college for film and video production. He didn't understand it. My dad was a first generation American. His parents had immigrated from Syria, and he believed that work is work. You go to work, you do your work well, you work hard, and then you take that money and you go home and you support your family and you derive your joy in life from your family and the time you spend with your family. Creative activities were to him a distraction from achieving your goals of supporting your family. So when my mother asked him, what, if she doesn't go to school for this, what do you think she's going to go to school for? He said, I don't know, economics? And my mother said, have you met Stacey? And being the youngest, I benefited from my older siblings kind of breaking it into my dad that creative pursuits can't be denied sometimes if that's what your drive is and your goal. So he did allow me to go to school for that. But he did not allow me to bring my guitar to school because it would be a distraction from my studies. I did bring it anyway. So this was just an ongoing battle. And just to get a little more insight into my parents, when I was growing up, one of my earliest memories, it was before I ever went to school, so I must have been 3 or 4. My dad came home with a Christmas tree that he had been given by one of the other hockey dads for free. And that hockey dad owned a Christmas lot, gave my dad this Christmas tree. My dad brought it home and presented it to us like he was a prehistoric hunter bringing a buck he had just killed and presenting it for the hungry village. He was so proud of this free tree that he got. My mom hated that tree. It was scrawny and sparse and dropping brown needles everywhere, and she despised it. And my dad was like, it's fine, it's perfect, it was free. So the next day, as soon as my dad left for work and my older siblings got on the bus to go to school, my mom just leapt into action, and she got a saw and she cut off every limb from that tree. And she piled them up neatly around the room, and then she took the naked, skinny tree trunk and she dragged it out into the backyard and hurled it into the woods behind our house, where it disappeared into the depths of the leaves back there. And then she bundled me up, put me in the car. We drove to a Christmas tree lot where she bought a brand new, beautiful, full, rich, fresh, green, pine-smelling tree, had it tied to the roof, and paid for it with money we probably didn't have. And we drove home. She put it up. She dragged it off the car, put it up all by herself into the stand so it would open before everyone got home. And then she proceeded to use all those limbs to create wreaths and garland and put it all around the house, hiding the evidence of the original tree in crafty holiday cheer. So then, when my dad came home, he was so excited about the wreaths and the garlands, and just kept praising how beautiful they were, having no idea it was the parts of the dismembered free tree that he was so excited about days ago. And it took him several days to notice. And I remember the moment he was sitting across the room and he just said, tilted, "Is that a different tree?" And that was their relationship and their dynamic. My mother, wild, creative, completely disregarded rules. And my dad, frugal, risk-averse, and very stable. And it's those two energies, I think, that have inspired and guided me throughout my life. But every time I'd leave the house, just when I was a teenager, my dad would say, "I love you, wear your seatbelt, don't take any risks." Every time. Like, what a terrible thing to say to a person. Don't take any risks. But that's who he was. He was almost fearful, whereas my mother's almost reckless. And so here I was now in my sister's attic with my divorce and my bankruptcy, and I realized I had been living with my mother's energy entirely. I had been impulsive. I had been pursuing things with zero plan. And last night I dug out the journal that I had been writing in at that time, and I had, just before I moved in with my sister, there was a festival, an improv festival here in Portland. And I had gone to that, and we all went out to a bar afterwards, and the guest teacher at that festival said to me, and to everyone at the table, what would you do if money were no option? What would you do? We've all had that question, right? We've all thought about that question. But I heard myself say, I don't know, I guess I'd do something like this, like open a theater and create a community or something like that. At this point, I had done zero improv in my life, like very little. But I had loved what I had seen, and I heard myself say those words. So as I was writing in my journal, in my sister's attic, I wrote those words down. And to quote exactly what I wrote in there, I wrote, deep down, I know what I want. I want to run a performance space. That's what I want. Why does it scare me so to write it down when it makes me so happy to think it? And it was that fear that made me know I wanted it. Like for me, fear has always been an indication of excitement, an indication that I'm invested in this thing or passionate about this thing. So it was the fear of it, of even speaking it, that made me think, wow, I must really want this. And in regards to what we had done in Eugene, I wrote, I know what we did wrong. We started our own business without a plan. We invested money in a dream without a plan, without a financial, marketing plan, anything. And now I know it may take years, but I've got time. Not money, but time. And that was in 1998. And in 10 years later, in 2008, I opened this theater. It only took 10 years, you guys. 10 years after writing that down, I was doing it. But there was so much that happened in that span of time. I knew I had to become qualified to teach and to understand what I was doing here. So I moved back to Portland, started studying improv. I started working at the animation studio because I wanted to be in a creative environment. And I was an executive assistant. And at one point, they said they needed some stop motion animators because they had so much in production. They were using everybody. And so they did in-house training. And so I went through that training. They offered me a job. It was 10 weeks. I could spend 10 weeks as a stop motion animator. But my boss, who ran that company, wouldn't let me take a 10-week break. He made me choose between becoming an animator for 10 weeks or keeping my administrative assistant job with benefits and a regular paycheck. And so it was the first time that I was again kind of faced with this art versus security option. And I was terrified and excited, and I was like, I gotta do this. When will I ever have a chance to be a stop motion animator on a primetime television show ever again? So I took that job. I worked for 10 weeks. I got an extension of 2 more weeks. But during that period of time, I met the director of one of the episodes, and he was working with the head of the commercial division. And I used that relationship to start freelancing for them and producing some projects for their commercial clients. And that evolved into its own company that I helped start up. I worked 80 hours a week, but I wasn't an owner. But I invested in that company as if I was to create my own job. So when it first started, I was booking all the flights and ordering the food, as well as doing some creative stuff that I enjoyed. And then over time, that job became more and more the creative part, and we got to hire people to do the parts that I did not enjoy. I ended up working that job for 18 years. And that job allowed me to have the time and the money to move to Chicago and study improv at Second City, to pay for all of those classes. And I eventually took a freelance position with them because I wasn't going to grow there either. Once I had learned all I had learned, it was a very small company. So I took that leap to move to Chicago. So my whole life has been like, I think of it a little bit like a river, and you're trying to cross the river, and if you try to just jump into the river, you might fall and hit your head and drown. But if you don't start to walk across the river, you're not going to get anywhere. And so each step, as I started taking risks, but taking them cautiously and conscientiously, it was like securing myself on one rock and then taking the step onto the next rock and not putting my full weight on it until I was sure it was okay, and then stepping over. And so investing in that company that wasn't mine allowed me to invest in my artistic pursuits. It gave me time, freedom, and it gave me money. And when I was at Second City, I did their directing program, and in our class they said, we'll never have a woman direct our main stage shows. So I was in their directing program, taking their classes, teaching their classes, and it was 10, 12 years ago. It was in Chicago. It was a very different world than it is even today. And they said it very casually. They said every cast needs an alpha male, and an alpha male will never listen to a woman director. And being from the suck it up generation, I was like, all right, well, I just got to prove them wrong on that. But for my final project, the producers didn't even come see it. There were 2 women in the program. They went and saw all the men's projects, but they didn't even come see ours. So that was another turning point where I said, well, I tried to work within this institution that already exists. There is no place for me. And so investing in myself wasn't even a question at that point. It was my only option. And so I moved back to Portland within 6 months. We found this space. It was pre-crowdfunding. So I had sold my condo in Chicago, had made a little bit of money on it. I took half of the money from my home and put it into this space, which is a commercial condo. And this whole development is for women and minority-owned businesses, so it's a large space that was way more affordable than many spaces in town. And I took the other half and was like, okay, great, I have $60,000 left, I'm gonna build out the space for $60,000. And I started getting quotes, and everyone was like, it's gonna cost you about $200,000 to do. It was just a big empty box. I don't know, Anthony, if you have some of those images. It was a concrete box. That's what this space was. And so I was able to get a loan through Albina Bank, which is now Beneficial State Bank, and they truly do support the community. I went to a lot of places. I had a 20-year account elsewhere, and they would not do it. It was 2008, so we're talking right at the beginning of the recession. And Albina Bank gave me the money to build out the space, and I was like, great, I got $150,000 to build out the space, and I'll keep that $60,000 as seed money for the business itself. The build out ended up using all the $150,000 plus the $60,000, plus I went $8,000 into credit card debt to finish building out the space, which means the business was started with no money itself, just the space. I learned a lot about cutting into concrete and laying water lines, and I learned a lot about how to run a bar and all kinds of things I never knew that I wanted to know. And the fascinating thing was that all those dead ends in Eugene became critical in that moment, because I had to use every skill I ever had. Knowing how to do real estate helped me figure out how to buy this place and how to finance it. Knowing art supplies helped me understand what to do to make signs and how to paint the room. All of those jobs that I had, making videos for fundraising, all of those things came into play. Every single thing, every strength I had, every skill I had was absorbed in figuring out how to open this space and this business. It also shined a huge spotlight on every weakness that I had. And it's why you can't really do anything alone. And I had a lot of people who stepped up and helped, who barely knew me, but believed in me and still perform here to this day, 12 years later, and have become like family to me and that community that I said I wanted to build. So that first year was the toughest until the 5th year. If anyone's ever run a business, nobody told me the 5th year is the worst year. Please don't tell me if there's another worse year than that coming up. But we got the space open. When it was originally open, that wall wasn't there. The mezzanine was built, but you couldn't get to it. We had a ladder. And the tech would climb up the ladder. This is on tape, but would climb up and do the tech, and we would take the ladder away during the show. And the tech was run by one of those performers' wives that believed in us from the beginning, and she would come over after the show and say, "Can somebody help me get down?" And bring the ladder back out. The stage was really small and in that corner and overwhelmed by a lot of the space. And in 2016, we got a grant to install an entire TV studio in here. We have 4 cameras, switcher, we can live stream our shows. And we raised another $50,000 to finish the mezzanine, build the wall separating the bar, and to move the stage over here and make it big. And I spent the first 7 years working here at Curious Comedy full-time, purely volunteer. I didn't start getting paid until year 8. And 2 years later, I quit my marketing job. So now I make half of what I made at my marketing job. But, oh, nice. But I'm doing something that I love and something that is meaningful and that has purpose to me. And so I guess to wrap it up, and we can go to questions, but for me, like, whether or not my life is successful or not, I mean, I think I've accomplished some things, but whether it's successful depends on what you think an investment is, or what I think an investment is, I suppose. But if it's a financial investment, I don't know that I'm ever going to see that money that I put into this build out ever again. I don't know if I'll ever make as much money per year as I used to make. But that journal entry that I made in 1998, almost word for word, exists now. And that dream has become this reality. And this space is full of people who love it and who invest in it themselves, who perform here for free. Our staff, we now have 650 shows a year. We have 7 full-time staff members and a lot of teachers and bar staff that work part-time. And everybody gets paid less than I would like to pay them and that they deserve. But everybody loves this place and loves this community and is good to each other. And that's, to me, the most proud moments I have is when I sit here in the room full of our performers and our staff and our volunteers and am madly in love with each and every one of them because they're so talented, they're so smart, they're so skilled, they're so generous, and they're so kind. So I think that's it.